I see a lot of people making great memories. Titans fam, how are they?
Please welcome to the stage Vikram, Solanki, Director of Cricket, Gujarat Titans, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Vonnie Quinn.
That was Vikram Solanki, responsible for everything you just saw on the stage there. Pretty nice years in the last 2 years for the Indian Premier League. Vikram, what is it like to go into an arena where literally you have 500 million people streaming and 500 million watching the broadcasts of these matches and then winning? It's literally like being a rock star. I imagine there's probably 100 to 200 million people that wouldn't mind being in this room right now.
Firstly, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to come and speak with you all. I don't know how many people are likely to know anything about cricket, but
show of hands.
A few. I'm grateful. I'm grateful. Thank you. Or rather daunted now, perhaps, because what I say might actually might be challengeable. As far as the IPL, you might have overstated the fact that it had anything to do with me as far as that competition is concerned. We all know that sport and whatever sort of work you're involved with, the people are the most important. In our sport, it's the players. In every sport, it's the players that are most important. As far as our role, it's just trying to facilitate the best sort of environment for them to be able to thrive. And the group of guys over the last 2 years have been nothing but outstanding in what they've achieved. Very proud of them.
Sure, but there is no doubting the fact that you are a big part of it, of creating this family and of continuing this huge tradition that obviously, has roots in India as well. And they're very happy there, obviously. But you do have new people this year, so Shubman Gill and Rashid Khan. Tell us a little bit about their prospects and what you anticipate out of them for 2024, because one of them is going to be a new captain. Yeah,
so we've got a new captain, having had our old captain Hardik Pandya leave and join his old franchise Mumbai. And I recall somebody earlier talking about the fact that there's constant change in sport, and you have to sort of develop and deal with that change. We are no different. What I really enjoyed about, and I looked at that video, what I really enjoyed about watching that video, and I'll come on to the point about Rashid Khan, was actually the opportunity that sport offers, and certainly our sport, the sport I've been involved with, offers to sort of unify people of different cultures, different backgrounds. You'd have seen what's really important to us within our group in sharing the sort of festivals. So we equally sort of share and participate and celebrate all of the festivals that go through the year. Sport is one thing, but to have Rashid Khan come and join us and explain a little bit about his culture and be a part of and live his culture through our group is great education for some of our younger guys, some of our more experienced guys, and then different cultures. Obviously, you'd have seen the culture around India as well, and the fascination and the attraction that cricket holds in people's minds in India. But it's great to have these superstars of the world, because you sort of interact with them, certainly superstars of our sport, and you interact with them on a daily basis, and you see actually the characters and personalities they are, how humble they are, how sort of grounded they are, and essentially it's exactly why they're successful.
Well, we do have a poll, and I do want to get this going, because the question we're asking, and I'm going to ask it of you in a moment, is can cricket truly become a global sport in the next few years? Obviously, it has a massive number of fans, and really raucous, rabid, massive fans, right? They're such a great fan base that other sports would love to have. But so let's have a look and see. Oh, wow. People think it can't. Now, I wonder, well, we're changing it a little bit. It is dynamic.
You're being kind, 50-50, I think, aren't you? Thank you.
Well, I think it's the influence of having you here and seeing just how much influence you would have over the sport and, people like you. But can it become a truly global sport? I mean, I saw literally a pickup game with some kids in the old district of Dubai just the other day, and they were having a great time. It's in Ireland, of all places. It's doing pretty well. And in lots of countries in the world, but can it be everywhere?
Yes, I'd like to think so. What we've seen in the recent past is the growth in the game as far as the associate levels. Saudi Arabia themselves have an association with the associate cricket. They're a member of the Asian Cricket Council. They're involved in that. So that you have got teams within the Middle East itself. UAE have played in World Cups. You've seen the likes of America, Canada, also playing World Cups, which shows the game is growing. There's an opportunity, I think, in the coming World Cup to showcase what the sport is all about in America. It's going to be held across America and the West Indies. The game between India and Pakistan in New York is obviously the showstopper there. And admittedly, yes, it's generally expats that initially develop an interest or pursue any sort of participation in cricket. But then we, like any other sports, are hoping to grow, so it does become a global sport. There's talk of it possibly being in the Olympics at some stage. If that's the case, it's the shorter format that it's most likely that is going to be of most appeal in that sense. So if that is the case, if it becomes an Olympic sport as well, that can only be good for the game.
Yeah, I wonder what you think about the shorter format, because that's what's helped Major League Cricket take off in the United States, right? You just mentioned, and obviously a huge amount of investment from people like Ross Perot and Satya Nadella in the US, and then Olympic Games potentially in 2028. Is it the shorter game that will sort of crush it around the world, and does that bother you?
I think so. I think I've always viewed, I've never viewed cricket and the different formats as a challenge. I've always viewed that as an attraction to the game, because it allows you different audiences. Your established audiences obviously are sort of, and traditional audiences are geared around Test cricket, which is 5 days. It's a long time. It's a long commitment for anybody to go and watch anything over 5 days. So you wouldn't anticipate anybody that hasn't watched cricket to enjoy the sort of nuances and the intricacies of that sort of fine Test match detail. But actually, what we're looking for is to be entertaining, to attract crowds, attract new audiences. And I think the shorter format lends itself to that. It is shorter. There is a winner and a loser, so therefore you've got some sort of decisiveness in that. And beyond that, what we're sort of seeing now as well, and it was brilliant to hear about the participation as far as women's sports is concerned in Formula One. The growth of the women's game in cricket as well is fascinating, and I think that it's got some real opportunity to grow, to create new audiences. So the multi-format options in sport, I don't know of other sports that can offer different, quite distinct formats and hopefully attract new audiences in each of those formats.
So we're in Saudi. Saudi obviously wants to invest $5 billion that we know of in the Indian Premier League, which would take the valuation of the IPL to $30 billion. That's 3 times what it currently is. Could this be an opportunity to reimagine the IPL?
Yeah, any investment is obviously very welcome in any sport. Any sport will obviously, it craves investment. What it must be minded of is to have the correct sort of checks and balances in place, and to ensure that that investment is, one, good, well-intentioned. You totally appreciate that if there is an investment, private investment, private equity money coming in, there is going to be an element of profit, and the notion of profit, I think that allows for efficiencies to be put in place. So I think that's good for sport. But actually, if you are minded of having a slightly longer term view, actually growing the sport, growing the product itself, you allow an opportunity to have a return on that investment, or far more so. I'm not particularly qualified to sort of talk about appropriate investments or not. What I can say is my experience of private equity in a traditional sport like cricket has been quite brilliant, simply for the fact that actually it has brought that sort of professional angle to the game. It has entirely been minded of growing the game, growing the franchise, growing and going about it in what I would say is an appropriate way to develop cricketers. So if your intentions are good and you intend to be in it for the long run, I think there's sort of mutual benefit in terms of profit as well as actually growing the game.
I suppose the other possibility is that Saudi could actually try to start its own league, right? Is that even a possibility?
Yeah, the difficulty with that is finding window, the calendar. Earlier we were talking about the number of Grand Prix Formula One has. The calendar, as far as cricket is concerned, is so congested that it's difficult to find slots. That's not to say that it's not possible. It would make things just a little harder, and therefore perhaps take longer for it to have the success that established infrastructures have in place, where, for example, you know, your test-playing nations, your full member states like South Africa, India, Pakistan, they've got a culture around the sport itself. But that's not to say it's not possible at all. No, far from it.
How long does it take to build something like that? Because I think that is sort of the destination for many countries when they're thinking about a particular sport.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, you think of actually, I say India is an established market, but the very fact that the IPL, the biggest franchise competition, the biggest league in the world, has only been around for just over 15 years.
Yeah.
Shows that it is possible to accelerate that process. But I'd come back to the point that in my mind, it needs to have the infrastructure in place to be able to accelerate it. I think there's plenty of opportunities otherwise as well, though. You know, would you ideally want that bigger tournament as your sort of first outing, your first hit into the game? Probably not. It's much better to develop the game slowly and actually get to a point where, to some extent, the game grows organically, it develops interest, develops participation, and then it can present itself as an opportunity. You could accelerate it by actually having players. It's interesting to see how the sort of Saudi football situation has progressed quite quickly, and that's by having some of the best players and the best names in the world come and be part of that league. And I assume there is an opportunity, or there could be an opportunity potentially to sort of accelerate the process in that sense.
Do you have any players in mind that might do well for Saudi?
Well, the point is India is the biggest market. Yeah. Indian players, therefore, are the biggest attraction. And at the moment, Indian players are restricted from playing in any other leagues other than the Indian Premier League. So if that was to change, I think that might be a possibility for any other competition to grow. That said, you can totally understand why actually the Indian League and the BCCI and everybody might want to retain the primacy of the Indian Premier League to make it the premier product in the world.
Well, exactly. How much of a threat is that, the fact that the ban on playing internationally might be overturned at some point? Is it something that teams are actively in discussions about and talking to each other about?
I think it's an ongoing conversations, but I couldn't tell you whether there are discussions. It's probably above my pay grade, that. But
no, I just mean in terms of a threat to your own teams.
No, I don't think it's a threat to our teams particularly. As you pointed out, the Premier League and in India, it holds the attention of the subcontinent, the entire subcontinent. And at the moment, that is the sort of best opportunity for players to display their talent, showcase their talent. It is the biggest market. So as we're sort of speaking now, I don't think that's a particular threat.
And just on that point, can I say we're very lucky because we have Vikram over a whole subcontinent today, because this is the first day of the last camp before the season starts, and he chose to be here with us instead of at the camp, which
well,
I'm
where
sure
else would I be? I mean,
you'll get into trouble for. Talk just a tiny little bit, as much as you can, about your experience with private equity, with CVC, and how it's influenced how you've gone about business and how the team has.
Yeah, I suppose I touched on it briefly, and I suppose my experience is that it's a very positive one. Right from the outset, it was very much the case that CVC and the likes of Nick Clary and Gemma Wright, who I sort of report to amongst the rest of our group. One, they're athletes in their own right. They're sort of elite athletes in their previous lives, but they understand sports investment. What they very much spoke to us about was that actually the organisation must be run in a professional manner. It must be that cricket people make cricket decisions. We will look after the overall investment, but we'll take your recommendation on everything. They've challenged us throughout. They've always asked why. The question why is, if I've made a proposition about any particular matter, the question why keeps me efficient in my sort of thinking as to actually how can we best operate. And they've been nothing but supportive of everything we've done. They understand that there's no guarantees in sport. I think that's what makes it attractive, actually. There is no guarantees in sport. We might try and do whatever we can. The result isn't guaranteed. So far, they've been very supportive for the fact that we've had 2 good years. I hope that continues to be the case, because I'm sure, like other sports and other teams, we'll have our challenges as well. And that's when the real test will come.
How do you keep the fans as enthusiastic as they are? I mean, literally, it helps with everything, right? From streaming rights to bringing new players into the field, and into just keeping the stadiums and the infrastructure modernized. It's something that some other sports would love to have. They look at the IPL and they just drool.
Yeah, look, it's a challenge. Fortunately, it's not part of my remit, but to try and fill out 120,000 capacity stadium for your home games. It's no mean feat. They do a great job, and I think we learn from other sports. We look across other sports and how they manage things to make it an experience from start to finish. American sports are something that I know our team looks at to sort of say, well, actually, the whole day is an event in itself, not just the actual game. We try and play some good cricket to keep the fans engaged. We try and do that, of course, but actually the whole day is what we're sort of governed around. The point around sort of social media and our presence on social media, we're constantly trying to grow that, but we have a team in place to do all of that as well. And again, it's a credit to CBC that they've insisted that we have professionals in place for each and one of those responsibilities, and they're sort of well looked after. Other than that, we're really lucky to have a sort of really engaged fan base. You could talk about cricket to absolutely anybody in India. They'll be an expert on the matter.
We're out of time, but I do have to ask you for a brief word for all the cricket fans out there of what you're going to do on March 24th, because it's coming up quickly, and you're going to be facing your previous team captain, Hardik Pandya.
Yeah, you couldn't have written a better script, really, could you? So for those that aren't aware, we had a change in captaincy. Hardik Pandya, who was our captain for the first 2 years, having won the first year and come runners-up in the second year, he's moved back to his old franchise, and just as you might coincidentally expect, our first game is, of course, against Mumbai Indians. That's a bit of planning for you. So we'll have that's an important game for us. It's an important game. You know, you want to start the competition well. Really excited about it all. Really excited about the competition, as is the case at the start of any tournament. It's an exciting time, but we're entirely aware that we've got a lot of work to do as well.
So congenial, cricket, and there's nothing that can't be solved over a cup of tea, right?
No.
Vikram, thank you so much for joining us today and for all your intelligence on the sport.
Thank you.
And
Thank you. Thank you.
Vikram Solanki, everybody.
Please welcome to the stage David O'Connor, Managing Partner, Arctos Partners, and Danny Townsend, CEO, SRJ Sports, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Jason Kelly.
Is he making you sit next to me? Is that what it is? He's scared.
Must have scared him.
Danny's the star of the show.
Not
Oh,
quite,
boy.
not quite.
We got two stars of the show here. I mean, listen, I love nothing more than talking about sports and money, so these are the two guys to do it. We're going to talk about private equity, investment overall in sports. I want to start with each of you with sort of a little bit of a macro question. You've both been doing this for some time in your careers. You've seen a lot of things. I will posit we are in this fascinating moment, Doc, where the world, especially institutional capital, seems to be very keen on investing in sports. Why?
I could spend the entire time telling you why.
Yeah. Was there a moment where it sort of clicked, or was it just a long time coming?
I think it starts with the fact that in today's media landscape, sports are the greatest aggregation of reliable audience and the most valuable global IP in the world today and for the foreseeable future. That's because it's consumed live and because, again, it is the largest reliable aggregation of audience. Yeah. That's first and foremost. I think if you expand off of that, there's a greater understanding and sophistication and professionalization of the entire ecosystem, becoming much more efficient about monetizing that fandom. You have this asset class that has a unique customer. It is, they call them fanatics. It is unique in its stickiness. The lifetime value of the customer is quite literally a lifetime. And you have this tremendous scarcity of these assets. So consequently, and on top of that, you have this tremendous need for capital, growth capital, and liquidity. So I think all of those combinations combine to make it of real interest to institutional capital in general.
And so, Danny, did you have sort of your own aha moment that this was a business, or was this something that was always in your plan? Because you have been described by someone, yourself, as an Aussie giving it a go.
You weren't meant to say that. That was green room chat.
No, look, forget that.
Yeah, no, look, I think ultimately all the things Doc laid out there are all true. And I think when I look at why it's become such a thing at the moment, it's because there is an inherent requirement for capital for most sports to bridge the transition from the linear broadcast changes and reliance on that in the economy of sport to a direct-to-consumer environment, which is going to take most sports time, and money speeds up time.
Yeah.
So I think all those things all come together at the right time, which means we're on a stage talking about it.
Right. And Doc, I mean, I want to dwell a minute, if we can, on this institutional moment, because this was long an area where rich individuals, would want to buy their local team. They make a little money with some car dealerships in Houston, and go on down the road and buy a baseball team or a football club or whatever it may be. This institutional moment that we're in, you have a fund, you have a fund, there are other funds sort of gathering around this. Does that change the atmosphere around bidding, around what's available? Like, what does the injection of institutional capital into the conversation mean?
Well, I think, first of all, if you look at any asset class where institutional capital has entered, the access to liquidity, the access to growth capital has made for material value accretion over time. And so I think the increasing professionalization and institutionalization of this ecosystem has been greatly benefited by the new addition, at least in North America, to institutional capital. It's made a material change in institutionalizing the entire ecosystem.
Well, and obviously we're sitting here in a country, in a kingdom that has had a profound effect on the global sports market. As you look around here, Danny, what is the net effect of that? Not just obviously Saudi Arabia has had a more than meaningful impact. The Qataris, the Emiratis, and others, have come in. What has that meant in your estimation?
Well, I think there's two ways of looking at it. There's where the capital is deployed to rent rights, and there's where capital is deployed to own equity. And they're two different things. And I think the reason why a company like Surge exists is to try and ensure that the investments we're making into sport are delivering some form of localization componentry to them that is there in perpetuity and is not at risk of disappearing in 3 years when your contract runs out. So getting in and investing and having some control over the assets that you're investing in enables you to genuinely grow a sports economy in emerging markets like the Middle East. So there is a vibrant sports economy here, as can be seen by the weekend. But I think what we're looking for long term, and part of Vision 2030, is to really focus on building a sector that is sustainable economically and delivers the social change required around well-being and all those other metrics that the kingdom's looking to benefit from.
So, Doc, let's talk a little bit, if we can, about sort of that localization and also the sort of profound effect that sports can have on a region or a market. You work for a little place called MSG, back where I live. You have seen sports play out on the biggest stages that there are. How does sports fit into a broader sort of business ecosystem? How have you seen that play? Because you've had multiple seats where you've seen this play out.
Well, it's basically a content play.
Yeah.
And as I said before, it is the single most valuable content in the global media ecosystem today.
And will it continue to be? I mean, is there any reason to doubt that that won't be the case going forward?
No, there's no end in sight. Again, these are beyond the content play. These are cultural.
Right.
So you talk about the impact on a local community. These are community assets in virtually every community that they exist. There's a feeling of ownership from the customer base that is very, very different from virtually any other asset class. So that there's and as I said, the lifetime value of that customer is quite literally a lifetime, and it's generational.
Yeah.
I'm a New York Giants football fan because my father was a New York Giants football fan. And my son, who's now 20, grew up in Los Angeles, but he's a New York Giants football fan.
Because you are.
Because I am.
Yeah.
So it's cultural, it's generational. There's a connection between product and customer that is unlike any other asset class.
And so, Danny, I'm fascinated by that point. It's such an important one. How does that change the way you run it as an owner? I mean, or does it?
No, I think any other industry would kill for the connection that a sport has with its fan. Like that loyalty doesn't exist in technology necessarily, or oil and gas, or in automotive. I think to the extent it does in sport. So that's where that true value is. I think when I think about how we invest and where we look to invest, it's unlocking that connection between an individual and the sport and inserting yourself into the middle of that to create value that you can monetize. And if you can do that, then that's a really valuable commodity, particularly in that customer journey that, as Doc said, goes on for their entire life.
Yeah.
So, when we look at sports, it's what are the sports that are serving the big economies of the world? What are the sports that have significant participation bases? That's really important. Ones that are probably nascent on their digital journey as well, because that's where a lot of the future income is going to come in the next round of growth in sport. All those things come back to one thing, and that's the fan.
And so, Doc, I want to ask you the same question, though, that I asked Danny, because I think you have a perspective on this as well. This notion of it's one thing to buy a company and sort of run it as you will, and you're serving the shareholders, and that's fine. But when you have people reading a newspaper or going online or tweeting or doing whatever, your every move, I mean, we have all talked to, I dare say, a lot of sports team owners who have been very successful in doing lots of other things, and they've never had the scrutiny that they have owning a sports team. Would you agree with that, Doc?
Yeah, 100%. But a lot of them have built their profiles off of ownership of sports asset as well. We wouldn't know who Mark Cuban is, likely, but for the fact that he's an NBA owner and built his profile and business brand in part through leveraging the platform that is the NBA and the Dallas Mavericks.
Yeah. And so how are you guys seeing, and Doc, I'll stick with you if you don't mind, how are you seeing, especially as you start to do deals, how is ownership changing? I mean, have you seen subtle or meaningful shifts in terms of who's coming in to buy, the profile of people, especially, and this will lead naturally into a conversation we're going to have about valuations, the types of buyers who are coming into the market? What are you seeing?
Good question. I'll preface what I'm about to say by my perspective is primarily driven by North America.
Yep.
I mean, 80 to 85% of our investments are in North American sports. The profile of North American sports ownership has changed. Some of it has to do with the tax advantages of sports ownership for for wealthy people that have a lot of capital gains. That has something to do with it, but also I think, you know, as I referenced previously, the profile of a sports owner in a major league in North America is pretty unique. You become a very important person in your community overnight. I think also, I think savvy investors and owners have come to understand the power of the platform and the value accretion that is happening and compounding on a day-to-day basis, given the quality of these assets. So you're seeing a very sophisticated and obviously very wealthy owner in North American sports in a way that transcends what used to be pretty much a local, live, as we call it, ticket and hot dog business,
Right.
To a much more global platform with sophisticated ancillary asset opportunities. Not to drone on here, but you know, owning a sports franchise in a local community gives you a call option on a whole host of businesses that are ancillary to that franchise: live entertainment, media, hospitality, real estate, etc.
Yeah, no, and it's so fascinating that you say that. We've seen that, I feel like, play out, especially around the NBA in the United States. You think about what's happened in Milwaukee, even what's going on, you know, a little bit in Atlanta, Los Angeles, et cetera. So Danny, thinking about this from a global perspective, you know, we're sitting in a place that has been aggressively investing in sports internationally and now also domestically. We heard from the Vice Minister of Sports earlier. How does that continue to play out? How does it affect your sort of strategy and playbook for investing, you know, these sources of capital?
Yeah, so we're a little bit different to Doc. You know, we're not looking at sports team franchises. We're looking at sports more broadly.
Right.
And
leagues even.
Yeah,
right.
leagues,
Yeah.
sports that have a event-based outcome that is a movable marketplace, right? Because obviously part of what we want to do is grow the Middle East, North Africa region through those investments. You can't pick up the Yankees and move them out of New York and drop them into Riyadh. I'm not sure that'd go down well like in New York. But so fundamentally, we're looking for different things, which makes your transaction very different. You know,
Yeah.
when you own and operate leagues, no one likes you really. Like, you know, when you think about a fan of the Giants, you like the NFL, but you're a fan of the Giants, right? So when you invest in the league, you do that knowing that you're really not attaching yourself to any of those fans as intimately as you might be if you were a team playing within that league.
Yeah.
So then you're looking at what are the levers that you've got that will build enterprise value in the league asset or the primary asset. And in order to do that, you need to ensure that the ecosystem within that asset, which is often teams or players, are looked after and are thriving. Because if they're thriving, then your product's thriving, and then all of the commercial levers that are attached to those go up in value, and the investment tends to work. So I think there's a bit of a complexity to that. That's a different complexity to team investment. But at the same time, you know, the principles remain the same. You look at, is there commercial growth opportunity in the sport? Is there product fatigue potentially that maybe needs some capital to transform that product into something more appealing to a modern consumer? So all those type of things come into play. You know, you're not going to change the rules of basketball
Right.
at the Dallas Mavericks.
Right.
But if you're owning and operating a sport, you can play with the product a little bit within reason.
Which you've done. I mean, the PFL, of which you're an investor, is a pretty radical, or certainly a good example of that, right? I mean, you are looking at disrupting a broader market. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think we're providing a consumer with alternatives. You know, I don't think the UFC is a phenomenon, and what they've done is, you know, is all to see. And I certainly don't want to pretend that we're going to take that away from them in what we're doing with PFL and Bellator. But what we know is that the MMA market's growing. We know that in most sports, duopolies exist to some degree where they want options. They want diversified product offerings. So UFC does it one way, PFL and Bellator will do it slightly different. We have a global view on how we can develop MMA talent. And as you've got a growing economy around that sport, if you can take some percentage points out of that economy, then there's money to be made.
Yeah. All right, so Doc, let's talk valuations. This is one of my favorite topics because I'm a business journalist. It's one of you guys' favorite topics because you're investors. I'm going to use the B word. People talk about, valuation bubbles all the time, especially when it comes to some of the North American sports. And yet, every time something goes up for sale, if it's not a record, it's a pretty high price, to say the least. $6 billion for the Washington Commanders, $4 billion for the Phoenix Suns, that are, I think, the two most recent sort of full transactions in North America. What do you make of where valuations stand now, and what's the case for them not popping or slowing?
We have spent a lot of time analyzing that very question. What we've concluded through that analysis is that valuation growth is largely driven 50% by revenue growth and 50% by increased profitability. And again, I'm mostly focused on North America when I say this. Growth is driven by many of the things we've talked about here. The increasing globalization of the IP, the value of the IP in the media landscape, the value of live sports as a marketing platform, the ancillary opportunities around real estate hospitality, as I said before. All of those factors go into growth. But on the other side of the equation, in increased profitability, you're seeing greater and greater focus at the league level, in particular, on containing costs and getting greater efficiencies out of your organizations. In the U.S. in particular, most of the leagues have been very, very strategic and successful in creating partnerships with the players, which is frankly your largest cost center of any sports franchise. And you're seeing greater and greater regulation and cost containment at the league level. I think what's happening, we're here in Jeddah, and what's happened in F1 is a model of that kind of stewardship of an asset. I think what Liberty has done in terms of reining in the cost side, it helps to create a level playing field. Your leagues end up being more competitive. We're starting to see that happen in European football quite effectively. I think this last January's transfer market was materially different than previous January transfer markets. So you're seeing that kind of regulation benefit the entire league, and it's a tide that lifts all boats. So again, these valuations are driven by growth on the one hand and cost containment on the other, and we don't see an end in sight for that.
Yeah. And so, Danny, when you're looking at deals, I mean, how often are you running into situations where it's like, this is just, the numbers just don't pencil out, it's too expensive, and how often are you seeing it's like, oh, okay, that's, I can make that work?
Again, I think you look at the commercial growth drivers, and if they're still there and they've still got headroom, and the valuations are, to an extent realistic, I think there is in some instances, at least in our experience, some numbers that are fanciful, if I'm honest. But I think at the same time, if you're dealing with sophisticated leagues and asset owners, they understand what they're sitting on is valuable. And particularly in the sector that we're investing in, it's hard to find things to invest in. There are plenty of professional sports teams around the world, North America alone, but around the world, that are available assets to trade. When you're looking at sports themselves, it's much harder. There are fewer assets out there that you can actually invest in. You can't invest in FIFA, right? So football, when you're looking at a governing body...
If only. If only.
Well, maybe you can. No, but look, at the end of the day, you do have scarce resource there, and that scarcity is why they're expensive.
Yeah.
And as long as you believe in the sport and you believe that it's going to be around a long time into the future, then all of those things that Doc talked to and all the things we talked to earlier on in this chat all come to bear fruit, and I think the valuations will continue to hold up.
You know, Doc, one thing that we've done a lot of work on, we heard Susie Wolf talk about it this morning, is this, talk about a moment, this sort of catalytic moment for women's sports. I mean, back home, we're seeing an immense interest in the NWSL, the National Women's Soccer League. In the United States, franchises going for 25 times what they did a few years ago, big expansion team in the Bay Area. Is there... I think the answer to this is yes. Yes, there is a business case for it. What is the business case? Is there a specific business case for women's sports, I guess, is the question.
I think
or is it the same?
It boils down to growth.
Yeah.
You're seeing such momentum in that landscape, particularly with women's football. But something I'm less familiar with, but women's cricket.
Yeah.
The momentum and growth in terms of audience and affinity for these assets is exponential. I think what's interesting, to digress for 1 second, but the opportunity in women's football that exists, in my opinion, is unique. You have a situation where the largest sports market in the world, the U.S., actually means something in football, whereas it doesn't on the men's side, sadly. And yet you have Europe coming in such a big way. We're investors in PSG. The PSG women's franchise is incredibly robust and growing dramatically. So you have this opportunity in women's football to create a truly global competition that doesn't exist in virtually any other sport. It exists in MMA and golf and tennis, but it's in a league format. There is such a tremendous opportunity with women's football that I'm not sure that the various fiefdoms are identifying and capitalizing on, if you ask me.
Interesting. All right, we've only got about a minute left, less. Danny, I'm going to give you the last word. What's the most interesting either sports or league that you've seen in sort of your recent travels without giving away any secret IP?
There are a couple that I can't give up, but I think it's, and I'm not going to name one specifically, largely because I don't think I've seen one. I think what it is, where we think there's some interesting stuff to do, is take the component parts of a great sport and make it better.
Yeah.
And I think that's when we go into our investments, we want to be transformative to that sport. Our capital needs to make a difference to the sport. We're not interested in putting down capital and then sitting back and watching it keep doing the same thing it's done for the last decade. And that comes back down to reinventing a product, making adjustments to the way it's distributed, consumed. So I think you've got to be innovative now as a sport to keep up with a modern consumer. And I think it's the sports that are thinking about that the right way are going to be the ones that are more interesting and the ones that we'll certainly be looking to invest our capital in.
All right, we'll watch this space for whatever the next big thing is. Danny, Doc, thank you so much. Really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you all.
Thanks, mate.
Please welcome to the stage Carlo Nohra, Chief Operating Officer, Saudi Pro League, and Emeric Hudault, Chief Financial Officer, Fosun Sports Group, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Vonnie Quinn.
All right, folks, we are going to use handhelds this time. How's everybody doing out there? All right, I noticed they've stopped practicing for the Formula One, so I guess they're either taking a nap or perhaps they didn't want to disturb us. But there's nothing like getting the adrenaline going with a few laps and that engine sound, right? So that's what we've been experiencing. I do want to tell you something very exciting coming up in just a few minutes. Anyone ever heard of Edouard Mendy? Yeah, he's going to be joining me in just a little while after we talk to these two wonderful gentlemen. about his experiences in Saudi. He's with Al Ahly Club now. So we're going to ask him all about that, and you have to stick around for that because it's just going to be a great conversation. But you're sticking around anyway because we've got these two wonderful men. Carlo Nohra, that's a Lebanese name originally, I just learned, and Emeric Hudault. So thank you so much for joining. Oh, are all my notes gone? Oh, Carlo, thank you. Well, also, you can participate in this conversation. I've got an iPad up here, and I'm going to be able to read your questions. And if any of them are any good, then I might ask one or two. So, Carlo, let me start with you. The league has said that more than 80% of Saudi Arabia's population either plays, attends, or follows football. Now, 9 months ago, there was obviously a huge round of investment, some privatization, Saudi's PIF getting involved in 4 different clubs. How do you make sure that those 80% join with those clubs and sort of get behind those clubs and continue to play, and that sport gets, mobilized?
Well, we're obviously capitalizing on that massive interest in football in this country. But what we set off to do is to make sure that we deliver to that 8% of the population, hopefully more around the world, the most entertaining product that we can. And that's a very long-term journey for us. We know we're not where we need to be, but we'll get there, given the trajectory that we've already started on. But it is essential that we engage with them in a very practical sense and deliver to them the type of entertainment and aspirational goals that they can attain through being an active participant in the sport.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a great start already, right? And some of the caliber of players that you've been attracting have been very eye-popping, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But Emeric, perhaps you could let us know if there are lessons that maybe Carlo can learn from some of your past experiences.
Look, I think your point on participation is key. Ultimately, in football, a lot of the energy comes from the communities. It's very organic, and if you really want to have a successful league, it is the most important component. Without that, you can create the biggest stadiums, you can bring in the best players. Ultimately, we've seen it during COVID, an empty stadium is what kills sports. So you're starting on a great footing for sure.
All right, well, let me spell it out a little more, Emeric. What can you tell Carlo about the difficulties that come when a country decides to invest heavily in sport? For example, China.
Look, participation is one of the biggest difference. In China, the participation in football is around 15% of the population. It's 80% here. And also, the big benefit Saudi is I think they're trying to build an entire ecosystem when the policy in China was very much about trying to win the World Cup by 2050. And because of that, they probably lacked a bit of focus when it came around investing in the league and building the right product. And then that product drives the players, those players become the next national team, and that's how you win ultimately. So you know, the big thing again would be make sure you bring the country along with you, make sure you bring the fans. It looks like it's probably a good place to do that. So I wish you all the best.
So Carlo, when you look to building this pro league and building, you know, a huge amount of support for the sport in Saudi, to where do you look? Europe, China, where are you getting your lessons and your ideas from, I guess, your inspiration?
We certainly look to Europe for inspiration because they have set the watermark for where the quality in the football product needs to be. But what we don't want to become is another Europe. We want to learn from them, but we want to be able to chart our own course. We've got a great opportunity here. We're not shackled by history and tradition. And we've got the ability to innovate, as Danny was saying earlier, and we feel that it's an essential component of our strategy. Not only to be one of the best, but to be a different best in the world.
So what don't you like about how the Europeans are doing things?
I didn't say we didn't like, didn't say there are things we don't like about Europe. We just said we need to be different. And the reason I say that is because we need to engage with our audience differently. in Europe, audiences are kind of attracted to consume the product, especially physically in a stadium. Here we are slightly behind on that front. We need to upgrade our facilities, make the customer journey a lot interesting and that experience a lot better than what it currently is. So almost a clear field ahead on how we can envision what that should look like and how to best deliver it. The same applies to the product in the virtual world or the digital world via television, however they consume it. And we've got to become what they want us to be rather than just have them accept what we are.
That's so fascinating. It's sort of the other way around, you know, looking at it that way. I was reading that, for example, you can get a ticket for between 20 and 50 SAR for regular games for, you know, a whole season of, you know, an Al Nassr game, for example, which is not prohibitive. So it's not the cost that's keeping people, an average income of maybe $30,000 a year from these games. What do you think it is if they're not coming?
Well, it is that experience that I spoke about. It's making the decision at home that I'd like to go and watch a football match. How do I get my hands on a ticket, which is something we're trying to solve at the moment through a central ticketing platform to facilitate that decision. Will I be able to get to the stadium without having to spend an hour and a half in traffic? Will I be able to park the car? And those are purely decisions that you make even just to contemplate going to a match. Then you have to get your hands on that ticket. Then you have to get to the stadium. Access control, absolutely critical. Services delivered at the stadium. And in this country, for example, where we play our matches around critical prayer times, we've got to be able to provide prayer facilities. There needs to be a lot of upgrades to the facilities and to that experience. And eventually, once we get into the stadium, to get to your seat, feel safe, and what I mean by that is that, you know, you're not going to get pushed over. It's not about any other factors. But that seamless journey needs to be reimagined and developed and then delivered to our fans to make them want to come in and watch these matches.
So that goes to the question of infrastructure to a large extent, Emeric, and I'm sure you have a lot of experience with this as well. How do you ensure that the infrastructure is there? Because there's only so much that you can do, right, when it comes to building infrastructure. You can't force the government to do it for you.
Well, clearly not in the UK, sadly. Look, the infrastructure, it's extremely complicated. And in the UK, it's not about building it, it's about finding a way to improve what the existing and build on what we have. The right way is to understand the client first, to understand what they want and what they are ready to spend in your stadium to make sure that whatever you invest, you're going to generate return on it. The second impact as well that's not to be forgotten is ultimately, football clubs are community assets, and obviously, if we drag all the business away from town into the stadium, it would have a significant impact in the wider community. So it's finding that right balance. There are clearly a very successful model in Tottenham, in the UK, but that's very specific. What's very interesting, however, is that it proves that the US-type model of having visitors, fans coming to your stadium, as opposed to season ticket holder that would come every week, is workable everywhere in the world. I mean, I would say you need a mix of both to create the atmosphere in the stadium. You need the fans, you need the regulars, but economically, trying to find the right product that will attract visitors, that will be the high spenders in the venue, is also extremely important. So, generally speaking, it's a balancing act of what is good for the club, what is good for the wider community around it, and like every product, get to know your customer and deliver them what they want, starting with a great entertainment product.
Well, you're certainly doing it this year with the Wolves under Gary O'Neill, right? He's doing well for you guys this year.
He's doing extremely well. He's delivering definitely the excitement on the pitch. And we can see, I mean, it lifts all the boats, so the takings at the stadiums are higher. As a UK stadium, we're very lucky, very fortunate that we sell mainly, or pretty much all of our stadium to season ticket holders, so we never have attendance issues. But clearly we can see the benefits on, the food and beverage revenues and so on and so forth, and also the demand for hospitality and all of those auxiliary products.
Well, you have one fan in the crowd, or anyway, Vikram Solanki, who was up here earlier as a Wolves fan, but then he lives in Birmingham, so I suppose that can be forgiven, right, Vikram?
That happens to good people.
So, Carlo, let me come back to you, because earlier there was a conversation with Vice Minister of Sports, Al-Khadi, who said that there was another round of privatization coming. He made it sound like it was quite imminent, actually. Do you know anything about this?
I do know that it is imminent, but I don't know a lot of the details.
So imminent meaning months, this year?
Well, as His Excellency had mentioned, back in June, that process had started with 8 clubs, and more will be coming online. And that is a significant moment for Saudi football, because it is essential that while we have great leadership that is supporting us through this project throughout, invariably, this is a project that needs to move into the private sector. And seeing these steps happening before our eyes is again manifestation of how serious the leadership is on delivering on this program. And the sooner we get to that point, the quicker we are going to learn to live within our own financial means, which is absolutely critical for the sustainability of the sport going forward.
Yeah, so what does it mean for you guys to be more privatized? Is it 100% beneficial, or are there some downsides too, that it's not, the government continuing to be the ones that are the benefactors?
Well, what it really means at the end of the day is that we have that commercial accountability for our own survival. And that is only beneficial for our growth. What we cannot do is continue to exist as we have been up to this point, as a collective, the league, and as individual clubs. So it's imperative that we get to that point quickly, where we allow market forces to determine the real value of those clubs and the assets that they hold. And from there, we can then chart a new course to sustainability and growth over time. We are lucky, though, because what we do need is that bridge that allows us to get to the other side. We can't just flip overnight. And I think that is a very important factor that we cannot forget, and that we are able to be helped along to get to the other end.
Well, and obviously there's a very long history of football in Saudi Arabia, and there have been some amazing successes recently, the World Cup upset and so on. But does the Saudi government have the commitment to stick with it long term if it doesn't work out, in the next few years?
Certainly, everything we've been told that is the case. We were tasked with putting together a transformation strategy that took us up to 2030 and possibly beyond. We will evaluate 2030 what we need to do next. But there is a very clear understanding that for this project, time is required, patience is required, because ultimately this is as much a social project as it is a sporting one. But we need to change the mindsets within the clubs and within the ecosystem on delivering a viable professional product that is able to compete on the world stage. And therefore, we need that transformation to happen over the longer period of time.
Emeric, jump in here, because Carlo just mentioned time, and you sort of have both experiences, right? 10 years not doing anything for a sport, and 10 years doing a lot for a sport, right? When you look at two of your different experiences, what's the difference?
Well, there are different paces and different times within the journey in the sports sector as an investor. When we invested into Wolverhampton, obviously, the first step was to move from the Championship into the Premier League. The beauty of that is if you're successful, it generates very quickly a very high level of return. Then obviously comes the patient capital time, which is just building up, reinforcing the club, ensuring that it is deeply rooted into the Premier League, stays there, and maintaining value, while after that having the opportunity to build much more on the commercial side and taking the club to a bigger stage, really. Doesn't mean going into a bigger competition, but in terms of becoming global, becoming much more developed in terms of commercial revenues. I think the difficulty is, as you say, it's the challenge of patience. Once you're established in a league, I mean, you grow at the pace of the league a little bit faster, but ultimately you're not going to double in size every year. The young players that you've invested into and bringing through your academies, I mean, you know, they start at 8. They rarely play before 18, probably more 21. So it's 13 years. It takes a lot of time, and you're never sure about the results. So unfortunately, you can't change that. There are quick, very nice wins every Saturday. You get the excitement of a win, hopefully, or regularly you do get those. But ultimately, the patience is what makes or breaks the success of your investment.
So Emeric told me this was not a fair question for Carlo, but I'm going to ask him anyway, and then maybe Emeric can answer it. Carlo, who would you like to sign? If you could have anybody in the world, who would be your dream signing or two?
I already have him. He's sitting in the audience.
Not of the ones you already have. Your next couple of signings.
Look, I obviously have personal favorites. Some that already play for the club I love, so I wouldn't want to see them leave there, but I would love to see them in the Saudi Pro League very soon. Any player that adds quality to the league, and I know I'm dodging the question, but I will. You knew I would. Any player that adds quality to the league is somebody that we need to go and grab and bring them here. Because having them play here with the Saudi talent that we have will only fasten the rate of change that we would like to see in the league. Besides, we want this to be the most experiential entertainment product in the world. Hence, we do need the best players to come here as well.
All right, well, I'm being told that I can't ask my follow-up, which was a very spicy question, so it's a good thing. Maybe we'll get to it later on. Carlo, we want to bring in Mandy right here because it's the perfect time. So, Edouard, thank you so much for joining us. Do you want to come up on stage? Everybody, a big round of applause for Edouard Mandy, who's joining us, especially to talk about football. And guys, thank you so, so much for the wonderful panel discussion. We will get those questions privately later, because we have a couple of more that we want to tell you.
Thank you.
So Carlo, Nohra, everybody, and Emeric, Hudault, thank you so much for joining us today. All right, Edouard, thank you so much for joining. And for everybody's benefit, you know all this already, but he was voted Best FIFA Men's Goalkeeper in 2021, and now he is with the Al Ahly Saudi Football Club. How are you enjoying life in Saudi?
I'm fine, thanks. I'm enjoying my time in Jeddah with my family, so yeah, all good.
How did you make the decision to move country? I mean, obviously, as a footballer, you could move anywhere in the world at any time, depending on the offers that come your way. But it might be just a little bit more of a difficult decision to move to Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, it was a tough decision. But to be honest, at the end, it was really simple because I just asked one question to myself. Who wants you more? And it was clearly Al Ahly because all the board came to London, and when they came, they just like know everything about my life, which makes a big difference for me. I can clearly see that they really wanted me, and yeah, it was like the difference between the other clubs.
Now, I don't want to be crass, but there's a British comedian called Mrs. Merton, and one of her jokes was, you know, what first attracted you to millionaire Paul Daniels? And she asked that, obviously, of his wife. It's not just money, right? It's not just throwing gobs of money at somebody that brings somebody to a club. There are other factors involved. Is it coaches? Is it teammates?
Yeah, like I said, it was the beginning of a big project. So I wanted to be a part of it. Plus, yes, the amount of new players, big players who comes to Saudi Arabia makes the difference. I can clearly feel that the league will be on the next level. And yeah, as a player, you still want to succeed. You want to win trophies, and with Al Ahly, which is sorry for some people who support other clubs, but for me it's the biggest club in Saudi with the biggest history. So we just want to continue, be a part of it, because we have a crazy fan base with a lot of expectations, so we want to make them proud.
What do you see happening first? That there is some kind of Saudi league, or that a Saudi club plays in, say, the Champions League?
Can you repeat, please?
What do you see happening first? So that will there be a Saudi league of its own, or will a Saudi club play in, say, the Champions League?
No, I would say the first. I think the league will get better and better, and I think it's the best way for the league to grow.
Will it be a threat to other leagues?
I think it's already a threat.
That got a good round of applause. Who would you like to have come play with you on Al Ahly? Names, I want names.
To be honest, we have already big players. We have a good mix between young players, young talented players, and experienced players. So in my team, I think we're fine. But yeah, in the league, we welcome all the big players who can bring the league to the next level.
Have you had to deal with hardship having made your decision? Have you had to deal with fans not being happy with your decision, for example? And how do you deal with that?
Very easily, because, you know, me, when I take a decision, obviously with my family, but there is no way back. If I engage, it's 100%. So, yeah, I didn't have to deal with that. But I dealt with some players, because I was one of the first who came in Saudi, so I had to deal with some players who told me to stay maybe more in Europe, but 2 months later was the same player who was like, hey, do you have a contact for me to come?
Who was that?
I won't say the name.
All right, we're not going to push you on that one. What is it like to play in Saudi Arabia? I mean, I'm blown away by just the desert and how, you know, beautiful it is. But I'm from Ireland. It's very green in Ireland, right? So it's different for me. What's it like to be a footballer, I mean, on Saudi terrain?
I think, like, the people, they have the wrong picture of the Saudi football. Me, the first time I played against a Saudi club, it was during the Club World Cup in Abu Dhabi. And we played the semi-final against Al Hilal, so, which is the same color as Chelsea.
Oh.
So when I came into the pitch, I was thinking the stade were all Chelsea fans. But they were booing me, so then I understood that it was the Hilal fans.
That is the best story ever. Talk about transforming, you know, a challenge into something that actually works for you, right? So what is your long-term aspiration for life for you in Saudi?
I wanna be successful with my club. I think we are just the beginning of something even bigger. So I really want to be a part of it. We have young players. I have success in Europe, so I'm also here to share my experience, my knowledge, and to push them to their limits.
Well, I think that Al Ahly is very lucky to have this young man. Would you, everybody, please give him a round of applause. That's Edouard Mendy joining us today to round out Power Players. Thank you, Edouard. And folks, Jason Kelly back on stage.
Thank you, guys. What a cool way to end. I brought my own. Thank you guys so much. What a way to end, and actually, to really help us wrap this up, I would love to bring our partner up on stage, Jomana Al-Rashid. She is the CEO of SRMG, our partner in all of this. Jomana?
Please welcome to the stage Bloomberg's Gemma.
Thank you, Jason, for the very warm introduction, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm delighted to have met everyone today and really saddened that the day is over so quickly. For those visiting Saudi Arabia for the first time, I really do hope you've experienced firsthand a glimpse of the Saudi Arabia's remarkable transformation and its traditional hospitality. The first edition of Power Players Jeddah has gathered influential voices from across the sporting world, propelling debate around investment, innovation in sports, technology, and entertainment. It took place at a time when the global sporting sector has never been so vibrant and exciting, with an unprecedented surge in new sports, ideas, formats, and business models. It is only fitting that this event takes place in the region and a country so rapidly becoming one of the fastest growing epicenters of the sports world, with an expected growth of 9% by 2026 and triple that of the sports sector globally. But it would be wrong to suggest that sports is something new or that is to the country or to the region. Sports has always been a positive force in the region, evoking joy, pride, competitiveness across all facets of society. And nowhere is this truer than here in Saudi Arabia. The size of the sports sector in the kingdom rose to about $7.2 billion in 2023, and that is expected to exceed $26 billion by 2030, a five-fold increase in a matter of years. Through our discussions today, it is clear that Saudi Arabia is playing a key role in driving sports innovation and expansion, prioritizing global collaboration, tourism, job creation, investment, and further growth. Sports is now a mainstream focus, with many of the world's most exciting competitions and events taking place here in Saudi Arabia. The Dakar Rally, Formula E, the Spanish Cup, the Saudi Tour cycling race, the Saudi International Golf Tournament, boxing, and of course, the Formula One, which I hope you will all enjoy this weekend. But this is not just about flagship events. It is also about unlocking $600 billion worth of opportunities by 2027 in a rapid growing industry globally. At SRMG, the Saudi Research and Media Group, we've spent over 50 years reporting on news from the Middle East, telling the authentic story of Saudi Arabia and the wider region. Sharq Business with Bloomberg was born from a mission to inform and to inspire and highlight the most relevant business news backed by data and, of course, exclusive insights. This is why we have partnered with Bloomberg to deliver this global event today here in Jeddah, to highlight newsworthy stories of ambition and success, leveraging our regional expertise to broaden and shape global sports dialogue around the world. And here I would like to thank, of course, the Bloomberg media team for developing this exceptional IP. I'd also like to thank the team at Sharq Business with Bloomberg, who have built the partnership with Bloomberg to what it is today, and in the process have become the #1 source of business news in the Arab world. And of course, I would like to thank all of our sponsors for their support in bringing this summit to life. Last but not least, I would like to thank you all for joining us and enriching the conversations that have taken place here today. We hope to see you all again very soon at similar events in Riyadh, in Jeddah, and all over Saudi Arabia. Thank you very much.
Jomana, thank you so much. I mean, on behalf of our team, thank you for your partnership. It was so fun to put all this together with you. I will not thank our entire Bloomberg team. I would, though, like to shout out my partner in all this, Yajao's son, who really is the brains behind everything that you saw on stage. This was super fun. We had the best time. And as Jomana said, it's the beginning of a very exciting weekend here. We all love sports. We all love business, and there's nothing bigger than Formula One. I do want to recognize all of our partners and sponsors, especially Sharq and SRMG Company, and our participating sponsors, Numaraba, the Saudi Company for Artificial Intelligence, and Vashra and Constantine. All of our speakers, our moderators, my colleagues from Bloomberg, and all of you, please continue to engage with us on social media, #PowerPlayers. Enjoy the sunshine, enjoy the race. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much.